right. So thank you for joining. Welcome to our first CT Prep Data Model Practice session. Hopefully this goes well. We'll be able to do some more. Oops, my slides going. So my name is Niki Vankerk. I've been working in Salesforce for about 17 years, and for myself for the last 15. I have both my app and my system architect, and I'm working towards my CTA board review later this year. Gotten into the working with the Ladies Be Architect in the last, I'd say last year and a half, and really enjoying this community and creating some recorded sessions. I hope this one will help people as they're trying to envision what the CTA review board is like. This is a small portion of it around the data, so we're going to be just focusing on data modeling and some role hierarchy security pieces in this particular session. And I also wanted to thank those that offered to present. We have two other presenters this morning, Susanna and Vankerk, and we had two other people that offered to present. So if we do this again, then maybe we'll have another set of people to do some presentations. So for today, we're just going to go over how the presentations are going to work and some of the ground rules for questions. And then Susanna, Vankerk, and I are going to each do our presentation. We'll have 10 minutes to do that each, and then we'll have a Q&A discussion, and that'll be open. So I've muted everybody for now, but once we get into the Q&A, you're welcome to unmute. And that will be a chance to talk about why we made the choices we made, and that kind of thing. And then if we have time at the end, I put a few slides in around large data volume, because that's something that's always is going to be coming up with these board reviews and these scenarios. We have some large data volume in this one, and it can be kind of confusing still for me as well. So a little bit about that, and then some other resources. So how we're going to do the presentations, hopefully everyone's read it over. We're not going to do any kind of review of it. We're going to have 10 minutes, and I'm going to time it on my phone here. And everyone will be muted. So that's very much like the board review. You go in, you have 45 minutes, but nobody's talking the whole time. You get 45 minutes to talk or flail or do whatever you're going to do. The judges aren't talking. They're actually probably not going to be looking at you. They're busy taking notes and writing down questions and scoring and all of that. So it'll be like that. And so we're each going to run through the same, a solution to the same scenario. We'll do that one at a time. And then at the end of that, we can open it up for questions. And so the idea of the questions is similar to the board review. You have 40 minutes of Q&A afterwards, where the CTAs that are judging will be asking you questions about your presentation, anything they were unclear on. The point of the Q&A is not to trick the person or to mess them up. The point is to help them by asking questions of areas that the judges feel like they didn't cover well enough. And so I'd like that to be the same for this. If you want to just sit and be quiet and watch, that's fine. But if you have questions like, why did you choose to do this with your object? Or what about this? Did you think about this sharing? Those are the kind of questions. Everything's about trade-offs. There's always many ways to solve any scenario, as we all know. And in this, also in this, there's not really a winner. We're not going to award best in show. We're just here for each of us, the three of us presenting, to practice a little bit of presentation, to get response and to get constructive criticism. For everyone else who's watching, just to hear three options. There might be some similarities, might be some differences. And it's the same with the review board. There's no right answer. This scenario had a key, if you looked at it, but that's one set of solutions that may or may not be the best. And if in the review board, if you can justify your solution, even if it's not the one that the CTAs that are judging you may have come up with themselves, you still can earn your points and still get your get a pass if you can justify why you chose those, and it's and it meets all the requirements. So that's what we're here to do. Are there any questions from anyone? If you have questions, please unmute yourself and you can ask. Okay, so let's just jump right in. So I'm going to start, and then plan was for Susanna to go second if you're still up for that, and then for Vankerk to go third. I took pictures of my diagrams, only because I don't have much behind me other than a bed, to show you. So I'm going to present mine as a PDF and show you the pictures. In the actual board review, you would have a whiteboard, you would have flip chart paper that you could draw on. So trying to make it similar to that. So once it's Suzanne's turn and VCalc's turn, they can start sharing their screen. I'll stop sharing and then they can display what they've got as well. And we're just focusing here. The review board goes over a lot of different things: integration, system landscape, you know, OAuth, all this kind of stuff. We're going to focus on data modeling and role hierarchy and the user licenses, because since that's all part of data modeling. And from what I hear, data modeling is the thing that 90% of people that fail the board review is because of their data model. And it's one of the things you have to come up with near the beginning of your solutioning, because then it drives a lot of the rest of things, like the sharing and the licensing has to be correct, and all of the features based on the objects that you've selected. So that is what we're going to do. Okay, so I'm going to start here, share my artifacts. So that's my first one. I'm going to start the timer. So in terms of the timer, apparently when you're preparing for the review board, you have a timer of 2 hours. You can see it. And when you're presenting, you have the 45 minutes and you have a timer that you can see as well. So I'm going to have one here for 10 minutes. This isn't so much about making sure you get it all in 10 minutes, but it is a good practice for us as presenters to make sure we're watching the time and getting what it is that we want to get across to you. So I'm going to start. Okay, so I'm going to present Clean Bikes, who sell motorcycles through dealerships exclusively, and they're moving themselves into Salesforce to manage all of their sales and customer support. I've chosen a one org model, so everyone's going to be in the same organization. And then some of the users that we're going to have are channel managers who are internal users. They're going to have a Sales Cloud license because they're going to need to access opportunities and products, the sales pieces. We've also got customer service reps, CSRs who are internal. They're going to have Service Cloud, and they'll need that because they have entitlements, cases, and knowledge, as we'll see. We have dealership users, so we have owners, sales managers, and sales team. Those are external users. They're going to have partner community licenses, and the reason there is because they do need opportunity access for some of their bulk deals. And then we have customer users who are going to also be external. I'm choosing customer community license over customer community plus. They don't need reports. They don't need complex sharing within their own customer account. And the volumes get high, so that is the best choice in my mind for that. In terms of the role hierarchy, which will tie into sharing, we've got the channel side of the house. So we have the channel director with, it says 30 regions, and the channel managers work within their region. So I've got roles set up for Region 1 manager with underneath that Region 1 channel reps. There'll be multiple reps in there, and all the way over to Region 30 manager with the Region 30 channel reps underneath that. And then as partner accounts are enabled, we'll start to see partner roles with subsidiaries. We're going to have 3 roles, so they have the owner, sales manager, and sales. So that will start to get created for each of the partner accounts as they are created, and they fall under the role for the channel rep. That's the owner of the account. And on the support side, a similar setup with regions of 1 to 30, with a support manager and CSRs underneath each one. Plus we have a requirement for a global team that looks at all the cases that have to do with injury. They need to have access to that, so they have their own role with the global support manager and then their team underneath it. So let me get into the data model. Hopefully you guys can see this okay. So in the middle we have accounts and contacts, and I've demonstrated in this center here with the dotted line that we're going to use person accounts for our customers. So that's a combination of account and contact using a record type, and then business or dealership accounts will have their record type with multiple contacts underneath that to represent the owners and managers and sales team. We're going to use opportunities over on this side to track the agreements, the annual agreements that dealerships have with Clean Bikes, with the opportunity line items representing the different motorcycles and quantities that they are committing to purchase over that year. And We have leads when dealerships register online to become a dealership. That will come in as a lead. I've got territory with territory definitions here. There was a requirement that the dealerships leads are going to be routed by postal code. And if they cross over 8 countries, I felt like that was a lot of work for lead assignment rules. So I end up modeling a territory, about 30 territories to represent the regions, and a territory definition, which depending on how many postal codes they have or states or countries could be, 1 or 2 million records underneath there. And then a lead would be assigned to a territory through Apex as it gets created. And then we have basic lead assignment that goes off of the territory to get it to the right channel manager, perhaps in a queue. We have assets is going to represent the actual motorcycle that a customer purchases. Once they buy it, would be registered in Salesforce. We would have the standard account lookup be the customer that's purchased it, and we would create another lookup for dealer so that each asset is tagged with what dealership that asset was purchased through. And then we have entitlements and cases. There was talk about wanting to do case management with entitlements if they purchase, it's called, Premier or Special service plans they could purchase to entitle them with faster response times and higher level in the queue. So I modeled that in the entitlements that you can have added to your assets based on what you purchase. We also have error codes. At the very end, one of the last sentences was about 100 error codes per year sent into the system by each motorcycle. And so if I assumed that each person maybe in their lifetime would buy 2 motorcycles, 5 million times 2 is 10 million, 100 times that, we get to 1 billion per year. So it's definitely a big, large data volume for the error codes. And I modeled that in a big object in Salesforce that relates back up to the asset that the error code belongs to. And then cases also, we ended up with large data volume. They talked about each customer entering 10 issues or cases per year. So if we had 5 million customers, that gets us to have 50 million case records per year. And so there I'm suggesting we have an archive strategy where we move cases once they've been resolved or after, let's say, 3 or 4 months into a case archive object. That's a big object as well in Salesforce to keep the volume down on the case. Okay, so talking about who owns what and sharing. So I tried to indicate here whether things are private, who owns them. So if we start with the account, that will be a private sharing model. The owners are typically going to be the channel manager users. And same with contacts, they fall into the sharing with accounts. Leads will also be private. There was a requirement that only the channel manager and their management can see it. So if we have private lead records, they're going to be owned generally by the channel. I estimated 2,500 per year based on the growth of the dealerships, and each dealer that's added would generally come from a lead. My numbers came from looking at 4 million customers with 25% growth over 2 years and 10,000 dealers with 25% growth as well. So that's where the numbers are coming from. For accounts, if they're private, there was a requirement that within regions, people can have read-only access to their dealerships, but they only work on their own. So that can be a sharing within a region. So we have 30 regions, so there'd be sharing rules saying if it's owned by somebody in region 1, we share read-only to region 1, etc. So there'd be 30 of those. No sharing rules on leads. Opportunities would be private and typically owned by the channel manager. Again, I'm thinking 12.5 per year, which is all of the dealers, assuming the growth over 2 years. That is private. It talks about sometimes needing a dealer support specialist that has full access. And so that's been modeled with a sales team, giving them access. There's also a requirement for bulk sales where the owners of at dealerships want to work on deals. So that's another record type for opportunities, and that can then be another sales team that gives them read-write access. Opportunity line items, I had about 5 to 10 per opportunity. I'm not sure how many different models they would buy per year. Gets us to about 125,000 per year. Price books, we had a requirement that there was different minimum pricing per region. So I've modeled that with price book entries, having a custom field for minimum price and having price books shared out to the different regional channel managers. So they only have access to their one price book, which has price book entries for the different products with their own minimum. Now, product request quantity, there was a requirement to have all the dealers, once they've got an agreement, to be able to schedule out when those different motorcycles would be ordered throughout the year. So that would be a custom object where, for product request quantities, a monthly record per product, per opportunity, that the sales managers could come in and use some kind of Visualforce or Lightning web component to be able to see all of them for the current closed one opportunity for their agreement. They're accounted about 750,000 per year based on a monthly per product, where they have about 5 to 10 opportunity lines or products per dealership. So that one would be private, owned by the dealer users themselves. And then we could use a sharing set there to open up access to other dealer users within that dealership. So if the product linked to an account, that would match with the user's account as well, to give them access to all these different ones for their own dealership. Cases, that one would be internally read-only. We wanted to, again, do sharing within the region, read-write. People can work on cases within their own region in terms of the CSRs. We also would have read-write, a criteria based sharing for injury to get the global CSRs going. External private sharing on the case dealership to the user, so that the cases that are attached to an asset can be seen by all the different dealer users. And that's all my time. Oh, that goes fast. Okay, I didn't get to everything, but okay, thank you. All right, so I'm gonna turn it over to Susanna.
Okay.
And
thanks,
stop sharing.
And so we're doing questions at the end of us three?
Yeah. So as we're going, if you guys have questions about what I said, or if I have questions about what I said, or for Susanna and Vikalp, then keep notes of them. We can compare and contrast, or we can ask specific questions to individuals, but we'll do that at the end.
Okay, awesome. Just get my screen share going.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you guys see my screen yet?
Yep, I can see some diagrams.
Awesome. So I gave myself, well, both because I was a little bit busy this week, but also just to like give myself a little bit of a feel for the timing. I gave myself 30 minutes to do this exercise and realized that went by really fast. So I will talk through what I was able to do in the 30 minutes. So I worked on the same scenario, clean bikes. When, as Niki said, you know, this is a manufacturer of zero emission motorcycles. It's a company that has a distributed sales model, so they work with dealers that then support sell to customers. And previously, they had about 3 different systems that they were using for the different parts of their business, and they're looking to move all of those 3 separate systems into Salesforce. I'll start talking a little bit about the actors and licenses. So at Clean Bikes today, there are really 4 types of entities. There's the channel manager, customer sales rep, who channel manager helps sort of coordinate the sales at like a regional level, and they onboard new dealers and help with existing dealers and make sure that all of those relationships are managed again at a regional level. There's a customer sales reps or CSRs, and they are responsible for handling any questions that come in from their customers in particular. And they're also responsible for a really important part of customer complaint, which is an injury. Let's see, what do they call it? An injury sort of case, what happens when a customer is injured. So those get special handling that I'll talk about later. And then dealers are the folks who end up selling motorcycles directly to the end user. And finally, customers are the folks who are buying the motorcycles. So my recommendation for licensing was for a customer community license for the customers themselves. I actually, customer and community license for customers themselves. I think given the volume and the fact that they don't need to see information like opportunities or those sales objects, I decided to go with that as opposed to customer community plus. And then for channel manager, customer sales rep, and for the dealers, I recommend it as full Sales Cloud license for them. I spoke a little bit about the 3 different systems that they were looking to move into Salesforce, and these really are managing their sales process. So from a prospect to a customer, and for that we're going to leverage Sales Cloud. Also, they have this customer service entity that I also recommend we can leverage Sales Cloud for, as opposed to going to a specialized Service Cloud feature license. And finally, they have an authenticated portal currently, and for that, I'm recommending a customer community for them to have their customers log questions or complaints, and also so that they can search on knowledge articles and things like that, because there was a requirement in the scenario for a little bit of a self-service functionality to that customer portal. The 3 different processes that we're accounting for as part of this implementation are dealer onboarding, so what happens before someone becomes an authorized dealer, dealer management, so helping dealers be able to track their sales and make sure that they have all the information they need to do in order to sell directly to customers, and then of course customer service. So I will move over to my data model. Let's see. So for the data model, I leverage an entirely sort of out-of-the-box data model for this particular implementation. If we start from sort of the first process, that dealer onboarding, I recommend using a lead object, sort of a web-to-lead form for before dealers become 100% sort of credit checked and onboarded as Clean Bikes official dealers. So any potential dealer could go to our public web-to-lead form and fill out important information like their name and address, their website, tax ID, all these things. And at that time, once they press submit, that lead request with all the information would be routed to the appropriate queue based on postal codes, and we would house that sort of postal code to queue relationship in a custom metadata type, and all of that assignment would happen behind the scenes using some Apex. Once a lead is converted, a couple things happen. So prior to that, the internal CB, Clean Bikes employees are doing a bit of a background check. So they're doing a credit check, which is one of the primary sort of vetting processes that happen. So if the credit check doesn't go well, or there's also a phone interview, if that phone interview doesn't go well, then that lead would not be converted. But if we decide that we want to move forward with Clean Bikes as this dealer, then we would convert that lead to a contact and also their dealership account. And from then on, we're dealing with that account and contact as our dealer contact, as well as dealership, which would be the account. So moving on, the other business processes that we're accounting for with this data model are contracts. Once we do convert that lead to an account and contact, we are sending out a dealership contract. We would house in the standard contract object. And finally, once our dealers are fully onboarded and start to sell, we would be leveraging opportunities for them to track those potential agreements with customers. We would house our product catalog, our list of motorcycles, in the product to object, and our dealers would be able to create a new opportunity with opportunity line items that then reflect down to that product to object where we're housing motorcycles. As far as org-wide defaults, for the most part, we're looking at private sharing settings for things like account, case, contact, and really opening up our sharing settings via role hierarchy for our accounts, and also for the lead applications. And then as far as there's a requirement for channel managers, can bring in a specialized person for particular deals, and for that I would recommend just using manual sharing on the potential agreement records of the opportunity themselves. What else? So as far as our customer service, our CSR arm of the business, I'm recommending that we leverage the case object. And the case would have two different types of cases. One is like just a regular customer question, which is sort of the run-of-the-mill case that gets submitted via our portal. And for those would be managed out via queues that we have in place. And then for the customer injury inquiry or report, we would leverage an escalation rule. For any time an injury request comes in, it would get escalated to the proper person to handle that. The other security requirements that I'll just quickly touch on that looked like they were quite important. One is the tax ID that's coming in. The requirement is that the tax ID should only be visible to channel managers and their management chain. So for that, we would be giving channel managers, making sure that channel managers have their own profile and are given field level security for that particular field, as well as for the senior leaders. And then for, let's see, CSRs need to have the ability to see all questions. So again, the cases coming in, and that we would leverage case queues as well. And then finally, I'll just touch a little bit on for the high data volume. One thing coming in at the beginning of the scenario, they did mention that just the number of, let's see, the 4 million customers that they might have currently, and that it's growing by 25%. That was something that I noticed. And then also, let me just look at my final diagram. So my licenses and actors, we reviewed the data model, we looked at our diagram. Oh, and then just some additional, yeah. So the sharing, as I was saying, both account and contact are private. We would open up record access via the role hierarchy, and then for cases, they would also be private and then share via those and assign via those case queues. And let's see, is there anything else that I missed? For security requirements. Oh, so the knowledge piece, I mentioned that at the beginning. For our authenticated portal will provide some self-service functionality to the customer. We'll also be leveraging Chatter in that authenticated portal because there is a requirement to collaborate with other CV customers and CV product experts. They have a requirement to search and read articles, so we would, that's one thing I did not include in my data model, but we will be leveraging knowledge as a part of this particular implementation. And there will be different article types for both motorcycle maintenance, performance tuning, and then overall motorcycle safety.
Okay, that's it.
Thanks, Niki.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. So if you can turn off your sharing.
Yes. Let's see.
Thank you. Hey, Vikalp, are you set to go?
Yeah, hey, let me know once you're able to see my screen.
Yeah, I can see your PowerPoint.
Great. Hey, hi, I'm Vikalp Sancheti. I'm from Fujitsu America. I have both system architect and application architect certification. I'll be quick. My preference is also creating, using the whiteboards and everything, but I spent some more time and I could create in video. But my preference is also like Suzanne and, Nick, I also prefer to create on the charts and everything. So just keep it short and, quick. User license. So there is a channel manager, deal support specialist. I would assign, them my recommendation would be Sales Cloud. Deal support specialist, I read there that they can be assigned in some cases where, deals are complex, and that's where they come in picture. They can be assigned, as a part of team, or they can be manually shared. My preference would be to team, to add them to team, and so then they can work on the particular deal. In terms of dealers, there can be owners, sales managers, sales team. Those will be assigned as the partner community. There are two kinds of customer representative. Both of them will be Service Cloud. One is Global CSR, one is CSR. Global CSR takes care of more injury-related issues. right? And then customers who can self-register, they can come, they can, buy products. It's some of the products which are the, parts and accessories of the motorcycle. That's what I assume. That is directly sold by the, company. So that's what I assumed. And they can also purchase the products. Some of them, bikes, of course, themselves are being sold by the dealers to the customer. So that's a quick overview of the user license. A role hierarchy, I have a different kind of role hierarchy than what was presented previously. I preferred, head office, then there were offices, and then channel managers, 30 regional regions, and each one then, blown down to depending on, different regions. Right. Now let me come to the main part, what I have assumed about this data model, so here, web to lead, first the lead is created. It is private. It is assigned, assigned to based on the zip codes. It has been assigned, postal codes. It is assigned to a particular owner, and it is private, so nobody else can see apart from their hierarchy. Once, it is decided that lead. I also put there is if you see it has been divided. This diagram is divided into parts: standard and custom. I try to use as much standard objects as much possible. This could be a custom setting where I thought a contract is needed. Contract terms and conditions, legal language. It could be more complex, but I kept simple. These can be kept here. Also, discount threshold at the regional level can be mentioned. Now, discount again can be very complicated. It can be product. It can be at various levels, but I have kept it very simple that it is directly be associated to a particular region, and that could be the threshold of the discount, right? Contract would be something created on the lead. It could be based on a combination of legal language and everything. Could be on the PDF, visual codes, and then signed up, something like that. It be custom, and then once manager decides, hey, credit check is good, phone verification has done, or manager approval has taken because everything was good, and contract is signed, then lead to lead conversion can take place, an account can be, a dealer can be created, partners can be created, right? Here partners will be created where all the information will be transitioned from the lead as well, so that that information is not, it can be part of, reports, but in general, if you want to see immediately, it will be available here. Then I have also determined that we can use the contract agreement so that we can always come that this is the kind of contract we are, this is the kind which is used, contract is going to be used as an agreement, determine what kind of projection customer, dealer is agreeing for a year. And then on the opportunities can be determined, it can be broken into multiple months, or various different opportunities can be created, making sure that it is binding the contract. Later point of time, approvals can be taken if the contract opportunities or overall, volume is going above what was agreed in the contract. So that's how it is going to be used in price book entry. Minimum price is again a custom field will be created so that it can be validated that additional, if something is going beyond the minimum value, then it can be simply validated via the validation rules. I also added a custom object called tag, custom info, which is going to be private. Reason I kept it separate because at some point this account object is going to be shared via sharing rules with other people in the same region. But customer info should not be available to anyone other than the owner of the account, and which will be assigned. That's why I mentioned it, lookup and the owner field will be there, will be explicitly assigned, and so that only the owner and the role hierarchy above it can see this customer info, that is text ID. And then again, contacts of both partners and customers will be there. When user is creating a dealer, they can also create the contacts, partners, so that they can log in. Customers can self log in. It was mentioned that customers can also purchase some of the products. That's why order was used here. I had a product registration. What it means, it was mentioned that dealers will be selling all their products directly to the customer. It means that information is not going to be captured here. So customer will have to come and do registration of their product. And after that only, there'll be, all the service contracts and, all the different service can be provided to the customer. He can also procure additional services, and based on which he can get better response time of their cases and can get better services with the, with the company. And then cases and entitlement will be used so that, issues can be logged by the customer. They can also look into the case articles, knowledge articles. There was a requirement around error codes. So error codes, it needs to be captured out of because of the volume, but their summarization can be brought in corresponding to contact and product, and then that can be, reported on. So this is a quick summary of what I have thought of. There are going to be sharing rules to share the dealers so that it can be, initially leads will be only private, but dealers will be shared in future by the sharing rules. Most of the objects in this will be private, so that only relevant parties can look into it. But that's the kind of I could put Niki.
Okay.
That's pretty much it.
Great, thank you. You've got 2.5 minutes left just for your background info, but you don't have to fill in.
Yes, thank you.
Great, thanks so much. Awesome. Well, thank you, both of you, for doing this. It can be a little nerve-wracking, especially with people watching and a timer going, so I appreciate that. Let me share screen again. Okay, and okay, so great, thank you. I'm going to move on to questions. So these are just some example questions or things you might want to ask about in terms of how their design or our designs solve the requirements, why we went with custom versus standard, licenses, anything else, any other questions you have. As you can see, we did come up with slightly different solutions for things. Some things were the same, some things were different. So you can ask about why one of us went with one thing. Yeah, so I don't know if we can maybe start with either Suzanne or Vankerk or myself. Do you guys have any questions of the others?
I do. Yeah, I'm happy to kick it off, Niki.
Okay.
I'll ask just one for maybe each of you. So, Niki, I know that you mentioned for dealer users, you were going to leverage a partner community.
Yeah.
Did I hear that right?
Yeah, that's right.
And then just when your final couple of minutes, I heard you talking about the sharing. And so could you tell me a little bit more about why you were recommending a sharing set for those particular users?
Yeah, so I went with the partner. I was interested that you went with the Sales Cloud full license, so I was going to ask you. But I went with the partner more on cost, like lower cost, and it has access to opportunities, and it can be involved in sharing rules, although with 12,000 dealerships, I wanted to stay away from having sharing rules within one dealership to all the people within that dealership. So I went with sharing sets on, let me get my notes, things like, well, sharing sets, it used to be just for high volume customer community, and I don't know, in the last year or so, they've opened that up to also be able to do sharing sets with partner and community, customer community plus. So what, for example, with the product monthly quantity, where they're going in and saying how much of each of the motorcycles they'll buy throughout the year, if that record is attached to an account, we can do a sharing set with anyone else whose user is also attached to that same account. So if there's, you and I are on the same dealer and we're both at the same account via our user record, then if there's any product monthly quantity records where they're attached to our account, we have automatic access to it. So it cuts down on, I think, the number of sharing rules you might need for something like that. Also, I
wasn't aware of that change in the last year, so thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was that. And just maybe back to you then, what was your choice on creating a full sales license for partner?
Oh, When I was first reading through the scenario in my head, the dealers were internal. Just the way I was reading it, I was thinking of them as a little more internal. But like in the last like minute of my 30 minutes, I was like, you know what? Those are more like partner sellers, right? They're more like external sales folks. So I think if I was thinking about going back and changing, but I was afraid of any implications that might have happened to my data model. So I was like, I'm just going to stick with it. And
Yeah.
But obviously that would be more expensive implementation. But depending on how close those dealers work with Clean Bikes, it might make sense for them to have the full feature set of a Sales Cloud license down the road.
Okay.
Would be my formal answer.
Yeah. I had a question for Vikalp around I noticed you put Chatter External as one of the license types for your customers. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so there was a requirement around that customers should be able to also I thought Chatter feed and Chatter license, which ones to be used. They should be able to communicate between each other and discuss more on particular products. So I thought Chatter groups can be created and Chatter. It could be a good fit in this scenario. That's why I had there.
Yeah, I wondered if someone logs in or registers as a Chatter user, can they also then be turned into a full customer community license so that they can see, their product registration or asset. In my case, I wasn't sure that you can switch somebody once they get in as Chatter, but yeah. And I think I actually didn't talk about the Chatter part. I think there's some kind of a community setting that allows contacts to see each other within a community, which I didn't mention because right now it would have been without that. I think it's a setting or a checkbox to double check that.
I had for that like requirement, that sharing requirement, I had imagined that being like Chatter inside the customer community.
Yeah. And Vikalp, I had another question around your, I think it was a contract where you talked about for the annual agreements, and I wondered where you capture the quantity per bicycle, like per motorcycle in that contract.
Contract line items, you can capture them. There are contract line items. So right. I didn't draw that, but there are contract line items which can capture all the details about each product, which actually it is like, then it can be translated later. It is one-to-one mapping kind of thing, like contract can be opportunity mapped and then contract line items to be opportunity for the various validations, seeing that, hey, for this product, it is going beyond certain limit and all those things.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I chose to use the opportunity as the agreement with like a, DocuSign kind of Conga merge for the contract signing. And then this other object so that they could modify what they're requesting. And then we could tie that back to the line item for their opportunity to see, have you gone over? Or have you can't go under, but have you gone over? And then, some kind of approval process. And if it's okay to go over, the internal guys would modify the quantity of the line item for that annual agreement. But I can see how contract would be also potentially used.
I had a question for Vikalp. Could you tell me a little bit more about why you recommended Service Cloud for the CSRs as opposed to just leveraging cases in Sales Cloud?
So I believe, maybe we need to use the CTI as well in future. That's what I see. There are a lot of requirements about phone queue and everything. So that will all fall in Service Cloud license. That's why I mentioned that. There is a high priority in phone queue based on recognition of the phone number. There was a requirement around customer service.
Yeah, and there was like entitlements as well, which I think is only in the Service Cloud.
Yep.
That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else on the phone or online would like to ask any questions about comparing, contrasting, or anything? You can just unmute yourself.
I'll start it. This question is to Niki regarding large data volumes and your large objects. Why did you choose to go that route as opposed to maybe keeping the data in another system and doing like external objects?
Yeah, I thought about big objects because you can do, well, you can have billions and billions of records. And then if we, most of them, I think both cases that were archived and error codes seemed like the reporting requirement was aggregate. So it's like, what are the top 5 error codes, and what are the, closing percentages and things. And so you can do asynchronous SOQL on a big object and pull that data into custom objects. And then those custom objects are then easily reported on using all the standard features, dashboards and all that stuff. And also, for, I don't know, I thought, with big objects, you can see the recent records off of the parent. So for example, asset, you could look at the, most recent 25 error codes or something like that, in case that was something. And just to, I don't know, I guess to keep things on platform if possible, or where it makes sense, is what I thought. And case archiving also, to be able to see, potentially give people access to look at their last 10 cases. If it got archived, maybe there's a way we can use Lightning Web Component or something to query a small amount of data and present it.
Mm-hmm. And with external objects, like since this data only exists in Salesforce in theory, it didn't exist in a different database. With the external object route, you would need to figure out where exactly are you gonna store it to then pull it in via external object.
Yeah, with the error codes, potentially you could have like a Heroku database or something where the data goes to directly, not even in Salesforce, and then you could use external object to be able to pull, or Salesforce Connect, I guess it's called, to be able to pull that in. Case archive is like you're already in Salesforce, so if it made sense, you could just archive it into Salesforce. You can use Apex to put the data in there, and then you can use this async SOQL to pull out the aggregate. So, but as we said, there's lots of ways to, I don't want to say anything about cats, but there's lots of ways to solve things.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Hello, yeah.
Yeah, so this is a question for you, Niki. So you touched upon using territory management to control access for the regions. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah.
As for what objects would where the territory management would be used, like cases or opportunities?
I kind of struggle with what to do with the lead assignment, because I was thinking if it's 8 countries worth of zip codes, that you just don't, there's not that many lead assignment rule line items or whatever they're called. I think you can have 2,000 or something. And then territory, the enterprise territory management is sort of similar. It's like a bunch of lines where you can say this to this code, this code, this code. And it didn't feel like that fit either. So I thought if we had a custom territory object, which is the regions, and a custom child object, which is all the different definitions, maybe sometimes it's by zip, maybe sometimes it's by state, because really 30 regions across 8 countries seem like, I don't know if it really needs to be that down to postcode, but that's what they said. So I basically created custom objects for that. And then with Apex, when a lead comes in, it would take the country state zip of that lead through Apex on like a before insert or something, and it would find what territory it should be attached with and stamp it. And then the lead territory, or the lead assignment rules, could run. And now there's only 30 lines. If it's region 1, go to the queue for region 1. If it's region 2, etc., looking at the actual territory, the custom lookup. And then I thought that when you convert the lead to an account, that account would also have a territory, and same as customer accounts, when customers register with person accounts, they could also use that Apex. Say here I'm in whatever, Georgia, so that's a certain territory, so that with case management they could also leverage the region or territory of the customer account.
Okay. Yeah, so I was looking up territory management last week, and I think, yeah, with some custom coding, what you're describing for leads can happen. I was thinking what could be done out of box, but unfortunately leads, you cannot do them out of box with territory management. It's only accounts, contacts, opportunities, and cases.
I've always wondered why don't they let leads come in there, but yeah. So
yeah, and the second thing was, and I think something I was thinking, looking at the requirements for dealer management, they're talking about some kind of a schedule in terms of how many units they sell over a period of the year.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking there is something called a quantity schedule you could do on opportunities for that.
Yeah.
So that would leverage.
I thought about that for my solution. It wouldn't work because the opportunity represents the agreement. I will buy 100, or let's say 1200, a certain bike. It doesn't mean and then the dealer should come in and be able to modify. Am I going to do 100 per month, or am I going to do 200 in January, none in December? But I didn't want that to be right on the agreement, because as soon as they change the quantity schedule, that changes the opportunity, which is the agreement. And there was a requirement that the channel manager should be notified if they go over, and then check to see if they have stock, and only then would they update the agreement. So that's why I model it as a separate object that would track, here's all my motorcycles that I've got in my opportunity, and every month, and then they can go through it and modify it. But it wouldn't actually update the opportunity unless somebody said, oh, they went over and yes, we can do it. I think the other two, or VCUP, I think, use the opportunity as the monthly thing. So you want to speak to that if you thought about using the schedule for the ways for that.
Yeah, I used opportunity for that, but I thought it could be, multiple opportunities getting created monthly, and, it could be a visual force page, because it was a requirement that it is easy to be managed. So that's why I thought about that in that manner.
So you're using one opportunity to be that like January's, and then all the products on there with what they're going to order for January, and then another one for February. Is that what you did?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is good. And the last is under security requirements, they talk about being able to store free text notes about individuals who work at dealerships.
Yeah.
These notes are visible to channel managers who have access to the individuals.
Yeah.
So, what was the thought process about how to model that?
Yeah. Did you have something, VCUP, on that?
Nothing specifically. I created a custom object where I added, fields, but I didn't think about this requirement. I more thought about tax ID. I
didn't mention it, but I had thought that I would handle that with channel managers having their own profile, and then field level security being controlled for that particular field, because it says that the note should be visible to other channel managers who have individuals.
Yeah.
So that field,
I thought about it as the notes object. I think when you add notes to an account, so if it's individuals like person accounts, then it's whoever has access. I think that the notes security is taken from the object that it's related to, so the account. So if people can see the account, the person account, then they would be able to see these notes. I'm not sure, and not sure how that works with community, because you probably wouldn't want to have the community. I guess we just don't show that in the layouts. I'm not sure if community users can see notes if they can see their own person account. Yeah, and it's interesting with the tax ID. I read it a little bit differently. I read that the tax IDs would be visible to the channel managers. So whoever can see the account because of the sharing, because they're in the same region, would be able to see this tax ID. And I was just doing that through profile and field level security. But yeah, if it is the actual channel manager owner is the only one. One of the things I've seen there that's kind of cool is if you don't need to edit the field, so let's say the tax ID comes through the lead and just maps to the account, you don't ever need to edit it. You can create a formula field that says if you are the owner, then you can see this field value. And if you're not the owner, then you can't see it. It just is blank. And so that way, whoever pulls it into reports, you don't actually need to worry about, you don't give them access to the base field, the tax ID field itself. You give them access to the formula. And you don't need access to the fields that the formula are based on in order to see the results of the formula. So that's a nice thing. I'm not sure how you get that to roll up through the hierarchy in a formula. That might be tricky, but I have seen that as a more simple click way of trying to hide a field that's, because the trick here is that if you own an account, you should have access to the field, but if you don't own the account, you don't have access to the field. You can't do that with field level security. You can only really do that with like a Lightning Web Component, or put that on if you had a Lightning page, maybe you have a dynamic page component that has the tax ID in it, and it has dynamic rules to say if you're the owner, then you can see this dynamic component, and otherwise you can't. So there's a couple of ways to deal with that.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else have questions? All right, so I'm gonna just move on. I've got a couple more slides to talk about the ways that you could store data, since that's what we focused on a little bit today. So obviously, always try to use standard custom objects when we can, and generally the rule is less than 20 million records will fit into a standard custom object. You get access to all the automation opportunities, workflow, process builder, you get sharing, security, all that kind of stuff, page layouts, everything comes with it. So it's the best thing to try to do. As you get higher, under 20 million, but close to, you have to think about things like indexing, because if you're doing queries against even 10 million and you don't index it properly, it can time out. List views can run slow, reports can run super slow. So there's ideas around indexing. You can ask for custom indexes from Salesforce. There's also skinny tables you can look into, where you kind of create your own little mini table with the fields that you want to bring together. So you can do some reading into that. Once you get over that, you've got some other options. So we've got the Salesforce Connect, which I think Barbara asked about, external objects. So that is for when the data is not inside Salesforce, but you can use Apex Connector Framework to do queries, views. You can even now modify the external data as long as it's using a no data connection. You don't, however, get to leverage like workflow rules, process builder, sharing rules. You can query for a small amount of data real time. Otherwise, it's doing asynchronous SOQL and pulling the results of your query into a custom object to do further analysis. So that's one option. Heroku Connect is another option. I always get confused with Heroku. There's sort of two main ways to use it. One is data replication. So you have your data outside of Salesforce in a Heroku Postgres system, and you can sync it into Salesforce. So now it lives in both places. And it syncs together. You can do bidirectional one way or the other. There you can use standard or custom objects, you map it to your database, and it just syncs back and forth. And there, because you're mapping it into Salesforce, then you can use sharing, automation, all that, but you can't go over 20 million. So this is not a solution for large data volume. This is a solution for, I've got external data that I've got other systems using, or I've got a mobile app, showing it, and I want to get it into Salesforce. Whereas the next one you could use for large data volume. This is using Heroku as your data source, but using Salesforce Connect to proxy in. So similar to, you create external objects. It's stored in Heroku, not in Salesforce. No sharing. Similar use case, I guess, as the Salesforce Connect, as far as I understand. And then you have big objects, which the data is stored in Salesforce. You can go up over 20 million, into the billions. Here you have to be careful when you build your big object to set up your index in a way that you're going to use to query it. The queries have to follow how your indexes are set up. You can do asynchronous queries that can pull data into custom objects. You can also use Einstein Analytics to analyze the data from big object. So those are sort of the main choices that we have. And at the end, I've got a trailhead that's really good to walk you through all these different choices. And here in that same trailhead is this sort of flow chart of how do I decide? And so some of the questions to ask yourself is, do I need the data in Salesforce? Yes or no? And if you don't, that's where you start to go to Salesforce Connect or Heroku data proxy through, so you don't have it. Do you want it to be available in a customer-facing mobile app? So if you do want it in Salesforce, then you see, okay, well, how much data is there? Less than 20, let's go to standard custom objects. And if it grows, move to big objects. If it's going to be greater than 20 million, or you're going to grow that way sooner than later, put it into, then keep on going through here. Do you want to show it in a custom-facing mobile app? If you don't, you can go with big objects. If you do, this is where I'm not sure. It says Heroku Connect data replication. To me, that means the data is coming into Salesforce, and I didn't think we could for 20 million. So anyway, more to learn. But anyhow, so big objects, and then the next slide talks a little more about the big objects. So here, how are you going to report on it? So this is where, if we talk about using aggregations or subsets of the data, that's when you can use asynchronous SOQL to pump it into a custom object. If you want all the data and you want to analyze everything, that's where you can use Einstein Analytics. And I think with Einstein, you can also use data sets and create sets of data from it. So those are some interesting flowcharts to look at. So there's some links here. So this is that link to the Trailhead module about big data. So it goes over some of the options I just talked about and those flowcharts. If you want to learn more about Salesforce Connect, there's a good project there that you could walk through. One of the things that's really important when you're talking about your data model is understanding license types and what objects licenses can access. It's really key. If you choose, the customer community and then you have an object that they can't see, one of my mocks I did, I wanted the partner users to be able to create products. Well, they can't create products, they can view products, but so anyway, is licenses. So this link talks about the licenses and what they can access. And there's also this cool little chart I found. Let's see if I can zoom in here. I found this in the System Architect workbook. If similar to the App Architect workbook, we got this scenario out of. For the Universal Health Bit Module 3, if you want to find it, talks about the different licenses. And this is kind of a neat one-pager to say, okay, if I've got, Sales Cloud, what are the different objects I have access to? And then if I add on, Service Cloud is essentially, a little bit more, but without here, you see you can't get the quotes and sales contracts. And you can also see how it layers. Customer Community, you get a certain set. If you move up to Customer Community Plus, it adds on access to things like, sharing and content reports. And then if you go up to Partner Community, you have an additional set of objects you can access. And one of the things to look at, which I haven't really, is the Lightning CRM, or Leah, I think it's called. Another, and they change names all the time, so it can be tricky. But it's based on, if you don't need like sales opportunities, cases, and whatnot, but you do want access to custom apps, custom objects. It's a lower cost. It comes with more storage, so that's another license to look into if you're studying towards this, to understand when that would be a useful. I think it maybe used to be called platform license, I'm not sure. Anyhow, and then a link to the Trailblazer community, where we can chat about things. If you guys have further questions for some of the scenarios that we talked about or the solutions, then please do post on there and mention us. And then here's another link to the workbook we just went through. And the two workbooks I find are great resources, because they have some walkthrough ones where you can watch, I can't remember, Isaac and Mike or whatever talk about their solutioning, and you get to see the thought process. And then there is also the scenario. And with the System Architect, there's actually two interactive scenarios they walk through. And then there's another scenario that's much more heavily on integrations and authentication, things like that. So they're really good resources to start thinking bigger picture. So that's all I had. Does anyone have any questions in general? I know that VCalp actually did do the review board. I think it was 2015 you mentioned, a while back, before all the different triangle exams were in place, and he's since now done those. So if you had questions about what happened for him, we have a few minutes left, or if general questions about next steps or anything.
It was 2015, yes.
20, okay, yeah. Okay, well, hearing none, I will close and give us a little bit of our time back. Thanks everyone for joining, and thanks so much to Suzanne and to VCalp for presenting. And I hope that was a good experience for you, and for all the people that were listening, that you learned a little bit. I think if this went well, I might try to run another one next month with a different scenario. So see if we can keep these going. It's a great exercise for all of us. And yeah, if you have any questions or anything, please do post on the, you can either post on the Ladies Be Architect or on the Architect community. Either way, we will respond as we can. So thanks very much.
Thank you for planning, Niki. Thanks everyone for attending.
Bye.